I want to share about healing trauma from Peter Levine. He has a book, and then also it's like all about restoring the wisdom of the body, and he also reads it on YouTube. So this is about being part of a larger fabric or group, and the presence of others can be deeply helpful and beneficial. It's community. Some ways that we have to remember, when we're healing trauma, we're working with energy, electricity. It's like ways that we release frozen energy and completes the escape with the full body is shaking, trembling, almost flailing around, convulsions or deep breaths, rebounding. Because the nervous system can be locked on when the amygdala is like kindling terror, but the quenching can turn it back on. So, turn it back off. So, establishing connection to the body is the most successful way for healing trauma, and our instincts will heal us because they're built in and they keep people alive for all the time that we know. So it's vital to keep from judging each other. We all have a different process that made us experience an inability to respond to threats and left us with that body-mind disconnect. And there's less obvious function, like we might want to be alone or not sexual or lower. Like the function has many effects. So there's effects that are hidden, like for example, the lower libido or wanting to be alone, disinterest in close relationships, not feeling sexual. And these subtle changes over time we adopt to without noticing them. So there's a loss of connection really that's to the self, and then obviously body, family, the world around us, and a gradual constriction, a loss of vitality, self-esteem, and potential to fill our dreams. So we don't fully envision ourselves as safe when alone completely, and having someone else around to keep an eye on us, out for us, makes it much easier for the body to let us take time to reflect. And through contact with body sensations, we find we're able to move from fixity or stuckness to fluid and flow experience. And when there's like car accidents, even just whiplash or rape, medically invasive procedures, receiving or witnessing violent acts, anesthesia, surgery, poison, attack, even a rough pelvic exam or falls or minor injuries, illness with fever, being left alone as children without explanation or with strangers, natural disasters. This is there's the key of like what goes up must come down. So there's an arousal cycle. The more we can experience the pleasure, endorphins, and euphoria, the more we can trust and heal our bodies to respond appropriately. So common trauma symptoms are hyperarousal, which is difficulty breathing. This is the higher heart rate, rapid or shallow breathing, cold sweats, tingling, muscular tension, increasing thoughts, mind is racing, worrying, intrusive thoughts and obsessions. And we can let them have their flow. They'll peak and diminish and resolve. Things like trembling, shaking, moist, pleasant sweating, waves of cold and hot, slowing the heart rate, full breath, relaxation of muscles. And this is the overall relief. It's like comfort and safety. It comes from the body's ability to regulate. So constriction is when the body's tensing up to prepare us for fight or flight or freeze, even if relevant fawn. And so it happens in the breathing and in the muscles. And dissociation is when our life is threatened and we face possible death or annihilation. We get cut off from what is beyond our endurance in terms of pain or fear. So sensations and actions is feelings and thoughts. Sensations and actions and feelings and thoughts and the mind and body. As we become aware of the disconnect, we connect. And then feelings of helplessness, immobility, freezing. This is the brakes on that hyperarousal. The body can't move and it becomes vulnerable to attack. And symptoms can grow worse over time or stay stable. For example, a spastic colon, from the anus. There's migraines, chronic neck pain, extreme PMS, asthma, etc. And symptoms can often occur in groups, and they're reminders to to focus back on the body and sensations because they improve as our trauma heals, and symptoms can switch one to another, and they resolve as the bound energy releases through the healing. The arousal cycle is tension, alertness, preparedness, mobilization, and then discharge, relaxation, return to equilibrium. If we cannot move from 1 to 2, from the tension, alertness, preparedness, mobilization to discharge, relaxation, return to equilibrium, then we result in trauma. Like this idea of the spirit left the body, it didn't come back. The body chooses the best option for survival at that particular time from the options of fight, flight, freeze. And trauma is when we're stuck in freeze can often cause the self-blame. If only I tried to run or fight, but we survived. We exhibited the correct response according to our biology. Coming out of immobilization requires us to understand that there's the ergotrophic system, which is the survival activation. It involves the sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic has nothing to do with sympathy. It's the arousal system. And then the trophotropic system, which is the rest and digestion, this involves the parasympathetic nervous system. And there's a pendulum. Parasympathetic is the resting system, not arousal. So and that's a cycle, like the second part of the cycle. So the pendulum movement from arousal cycle, like a brake and accelerator, in the arousal cycle, like the different parts in immobilization, both are happening at the same time, like a compressed spring, but it's being held in place. So we want to move, but we're holding, and that's how we need to empty. It's like a titration, which is a slow, gradual release of the bound up energy. And we might be shaming or guilting ourselves for the immobilization and being afraid of the involuntary, or we might be so afraid of the involuntary reactions like shaking or deep trembling, and we stop the natural rebound, but that creates more fear and anxiety. So when we come out of mobility, it can feel like rage. It can be violent in animals, and humans repress these expressions because we're frightened of our own selves and other. We might hurt ourselves or others. And this is like when animals counterattack and they're stunned, but we really need support. Prey animals are rarely alone, and it lets us feel safe when we have another around. We also feel like a symbolic death, like a rebirth, because we're reborn with a deeper sense of self and life. And we try to cut it off because we're terrified of death, but the energy of life and death stays in the body if we remain in the shock state. And we experience threat everywhere. A traumatic reenactment is to repeat and recreate, attempting to unconsciously complete the circuit. And unfortunately, by acting it out, we can actually further traumatize ourselves, but biologically it can be useful for survival if done to the complete cycle. If it's done compulsively, it could be dangerous and not productive. So the more we can experience times of aggression, the more we can start moving toward freedom, whether it's in play or conflict, where we're both prey and predator. And then fear-potentiated immobility is longer periods of stuckness, higher likelihood of violence, disorganization, and emergence. So we got to allow the immobility to come in and move out and that way it prevents it from escalating or potentiating the fear. Traumatized people do fear arousal, even excitement like sexual or winning, because the cycle doesn't release appropriately into discharge and pleasure from the activation and stimulation, which give an enjoyable sense taken all together of being alive and an enriched experience. With practice of moving through the arousal cycle, we become more complete and trusting and less traumatized, and we don't need to go back to reenact and repeat. And we learn not to get caught in the shock reactions. And when traumatized, we really lose our ability to be free and spontaneous. But through transformation, we learn to move and flow with that energy that's being trapped in our symptoms. And some tools are like the biology, obviously, is our biography, more than our biography. Like we have the biography of what happened to us, but then our biology is always stronger because it is true for everybody, no matter their biography. And then mythology, which is like having archetypes for the parts of ourself. So there's like Medusa, which is don't look directly at her, or don't look directly at the trauma, or Pegasus, which is transcendence via the natural instinct as escaping bondage of limitation. So I want to say that these are just non-Jewish, there's plenty of Jewish archetypes, but these are written by Peter Levine. Even though he has such a Jewish sounding name, he chooses, Medusa and Pegasus. And then there's like Creosaur, which is, connecting with clarity and truth that is incising, cunning. So we have avoidance here, we have transcendence, and we have clarity. So we can have different, and forget the names of them, but we can have different myth archetypes we don't even have to call them myths. We could have stories, parables, archetypes that help us a lot with these, with the process of don't look at it and transcend it, and clarity that cuts away what we thought we're separate from. It actually cuts away so we know what we are. The same trauma that killed us can resurrect us and take us to soaring new levels of exhilaration, joy, and mastery. And the process requires wisdom and clarity and being present, which we also, especially nowadays, is very famously called mindfulness. And obviously that also means discernment. So that's when the feeling, or we could say the heart, aligns with the body, aligns with the mind, or they are aligned with the heart. And when we can resolve the energy, we aren't caught up in the details. It may not be exactly as we originally remembered, or it may be a reliving or something completely different. And images and imaginations come from the body, welded, like iron metal, like welded to the sensations of the experience. So this is the balance between splitting off into fantasy or obsessing compulsively hooked into the details. So in transformation, a new relationship to the polarities through our actual body experience is called regeneration. So as you remember from a reality place of right now, the details do shift and we don't have to hold on to the images. Thus, we don't have to hold on to the sensations that became attached. For example, there's clenching a fist and then allowing it to open versus being afraid to even clench the fist. So there's a back and forth. It's a renegotiation. I said regeneration, but the real word is renegotiation. Renegotiating is the integrated brain experience of left and right brain, intellect and emotions. The instincts are working all together, and we feel connected and know that we belong. And the natural spirituality during transformation, we observe without judgment, and we find meaning. So transformation is really becoming whole. And there's something else I wanted to share, which is going to be shared in a different video, because I missed a video yesterday. But before I do that, I want to say some of the exercises that Peter Levine recommends for healing trauma is tapping, or having a shower, like pulsing water onto all the body parts. And he actually says we should touch each part and say, this is my arm, this is my hand. As the water goes onto it, this is my fingers, this is my palm, this is my face, as the water from the shower comes on. And visualizing the triggering sensations and feeling the sensations deeply in the body. So visualizing what it feels like to be anxious and feeling it feels like this, feels like that, and we name it. We like talk to ourselves about the experience as it's happening instead of like immediately tensing to it. We can relive the event through a fantasy where we find our strength and resources to hold on to during the event. Like we look back and we think about how somebody might have taken advantage of us and then not done their part, like maybe betrayed our trust. We had a deal and then we did our part and they didn't do it. We could relive it and then say, now I have the ability to get a little more clarity. I would where I can find my strength to hold on to, like I could say, no, I would like for me, I've been through worse, but I would like to not get screwed. So, I'm going to have it that you're going to have to do half of your part in advance so that I know that you're going to do it. For example, my ability to hold people accountable, like myself. And then meditating a visualization, both as a predator, as a prey, and in a chase, where I take the role of both. So this is very interesting because you actually have to imagine yourself chasing, and then you have to imagine yourself being chased. And what this means is it triggers that life or death feeling, but we imagine both that we're the pursuer and that we're the hunted, and it kind of draws them together. Another is giving permission for the dressed up bodily hormones with no place to go to stop expecting danger, which leads to avoidance and dread, not to mention hypervigilance, instead of holding that unresolved energy that didn't get to complete its task at that time in that place. So then there's a discharge that can happen. We have to let it move through the body in awareness of the felt sensation. So we actually tell ourselves, I give you permission, anxiety, to move through my body and release yourself. Right? And that's really, really like the highest level service we could do for ourselves. I hope this was meaningful for you.